Good afternoon, America. Welcome back. Seems like every few weeks I have to say welcome back after a 2-week hiatus for the Got Freedom podcast. Thank you for coming back, though. Today we have a very important topic, very important show. Some things precluded me from talking to you folks the last couple of weeks, and I apologize for that. But here we are. We're back, and we're here in Rochester, New York. We're here in New York State, and anyone that lives in New York State right now knows, what's going on. Everybody knows what's transpired in the last 24 hours regarding mask mandates and court rulings, and I'm here to discuss just that. So we're going to try to pack this all in just over an hour. My awesome producer, Austin, has agreed to, put in a little OT here. Normally we start at 4, get done by 5. I'm running late. He's got to get places. He's an important man, and he's got things to do. So we're going to try to pack this all in. Very too legit to quit.
Exactly.
So we're going to try to pack this in. Let me first start by saying this. Ironically, I got to work backwards, but supposedly at 2:00 today, there was an emergency court hearing on the status of the court order that we're going to discuss. As you probably know by now, there's been a court ruling out of Nassau County. A Supreme Court judge in Nassau County ruled that the underlying rules and regulations that precipitated all of the indoor mask mandates, including most notably in the school districts, that judge declared all of that illegal, unconstitutional, unenforceable, and void. But apparently the state was planning on filing an appeal, of course, which they have the right to do. And my understanding was there perhaps was a hearing today at 2:00, and I don't know yet what the outcome of that hearing is. So I just want to put that out there, because at any moment, literally at any moment, everything that I'm about to tell you could revert back to what it was, 48 hours ago. But I want to address that topic too, and we will. So let me go back to the beginning. We have to go back to the beginning and reinvent the wheel on this. Those of you that have tuned in and have seen most of my podcasts have heard this before, but it bears a reminder. Everybody needs a refresher. And for those of you that have not tuned in before, have not heard this, then you're going to hear something new, hopefully. So we go back to the beginning, so to speak. And by the beginning, I mean for this topic, we go back to this past summer. Around August 24th, August 27th, in that time frame, the Department of Health of New York State essentially issued a rule or a regulation that they claimed they had the authority to issue and decide. And essentially that rule that they issued was that anyone in New York State may be or can be or could be subjected to a mask mandate while in public. And more specifically, they went right ahead, they meaning the Department of Health, they went right ahead and declared that basically in the meantime, certain indoor establishments would be places where individuals are mandated to wear a mask, to include schools, hospitals, and places like that. And I know the vast majority of you listening are probably tuning in regarding the school issue. So I'll try to keep it focused specifically on the school. But quite frankly, this ruling that came out covers all of the entities. So, and if anyone that's listening has any updates on that 2:00 hearing.
So I just looked it up a little bit here, and so far the hearing lasted 30 minutes, at which point the judge said he would rule either late tonight or tomorrow.
Got you. Well, thank you there. Thank you for that update, Austin. That's what we needed to know. So I guess the good thing is that at least everything that I'm about to tell you will be true for at least another 12 hours, perhaps, or at least at the time you go to sleep tonight. So again, back to August 24th, 27th time frame, 2021, the Department of Health issues this rule saying that masks are required in schools. And again, I'll try to keep it focused specifically on the schools for now. And And then there's been litigation since then, right? Court attorneys on behalf of clients have brought lawsuits challenging that mandate. And there have been 2 court decisions that have come out on that issue since the time that rule was put into place by the Department of Health. And those 2 rulings, one came out of Albany County back in November, on November 26th, and the one that everybody's aware of, or at least the one that everyone's talking about today, is the one that was just issued yesterday, I believe January 24th, out of Nassau County. And effectively what the court ruled yesterday in Nassau County was that the Department of Health, which is an administrative body in New York State, the Department of Health categorically and unequivocally and unlawfully overstepped its bounds when it issued this rule back on August 27th. And the legal reasoning that was given by the court in Nassau County is that an administrative body does not have the constitutional authority in a representative government, such as the United States of America and New York State. An administrative body does not have the authority to issue rules and laws and to mandate us to do things unless, and here's the key exception, and this is going to make sense. This is technical legal stuff, but it's also common sense, and this is going to make sense to you after I explain it. And the exception is if a particular administrative agency in New York State, and there's dozens and dozens of them. I literally think there's 80 to 100 regulatory agencies in New York State. The Department of Motor Vehicles, the Department of Health, the New York State Department of Education, New York State Department of Social Services, and so on and so forth, right? And these types of administrative agencies do not have the authority to issue rules and laws and mandates unless they are very narrow and specific to the type of day-to-day functions that those agencies have, and the ruling or the law, so to speak, that or the mandate, so to speak, that they are seeking to impose has to be directly related to a law that is already on the books. In other words, they can issue rules that help to implement laws that are on the books. And the easiest way to discuss this is just to give a simple example. So I mentioned the DMV, right? The Department of Motor Vehicles. Can the Department of Motor Vehicles issue speed limit changes? And this was discussed in this particular case in the judge's decision out of Nassau County. And the answer is obvious. Of course not. The DMV does not have the authority to willy-nilly decide what the speed limit is on the highways. That is something that has to be passed by the legislature, by law. Now, can the Department of Motor Vehicles issue procedural rules on how you take and where you take and when you take your driver's exam? Of course they can, because that's a logical extension of what the DMV is charged with doing. Changing the speed limit is not the logical extension of what the Department of Motor Vehicles is given the authority to do. So if we take that example and translate that over to what's going on here, the legislative body in New York State has never issued any laws or rules pertaining to mandatory masks. There's just simply no laws on the books that were put into place by the legislative body, right? Yours and mine, our representatives, we the people, right? We the people elect our officials, and we expect them and demand that they seek out our input, have public debate before a law is passed, and then it goes through that process, and then laws go on the books, and those laws are enforceable unless they're later overturned, of course. But an administrative body on its own authority does not have the ability to issue those sorts of laws unless, again, they're issuing a rule that simply allows them or helps them to implement an already existing law. And in this case, because there are utterly no laws on masking, then it was completely arbitrary and outside the scope of the law for the Department of Health to, on its own, issue these rules, and then um, allow its commissioner, the commissioner of the Department of Health, to issue determinations that seek to impose and enforce these rules. And that's what's been going on since August. Again, on December 10th, the commissioner issued an updated statement in furtherance of the rule that the Department of Health put into place. And that's where the indoor mask mandates came for all of the businesses that have now become, the hot button issue. So the school districts and the hospitals and those places, those illegal rules were implemented back in August, and then there was a total blanket indoor mask mandate put into place effectively by the Department of Health on December 10th. And that's effectively the two determinations by the Department of Health that have been challenged by this court proceeding and have been overturned by this court proceeding. So, and again, another point as far as going back to the beginning, I've discussed this at length as well on prior podcasts, and that is that when Governor Cuomo, when the pandemic all first started and got rolling, right? Governor Cuomo immediately began to issue executive order after executive order after executive order after executive order, and many lawyers learned, to our surprise, that the state legislature, just prior to the pandemic, go figure, the state legislature effectively turned over the keys to the governor as far as executive orders. And what I mean by that is this: prior to the pandemic, and as it had been since the 70s in New York State, a governor's executive order, the authority that a governor had when they issue an executive order was simply limited to suspending any laws that were currently on the books. And again, it just makes sense because if, for example, there's a law on the books that limits limits the weight that a tractor trailer can carry down a highway, then the governor in an emergency may want to suspend that rule or that law or that regulation in order to allow emergency supplies to be transported down the New York State Thruway without regard to weight limits. That makes sense. But what the governor's authority was limited to prior to the change just before the pandemic was that a governor could not issue any new laws, right? And again, that makes sense because a governor, the executive branch, cannot act as a dictator. The governor cannot wake up every day, right or wrong, good intentioned or not, and decide what rules that we, the people, have to follow. Again, that is not how a representative government works. And if you read the court's decision that just came out, the judge goes through that analysis in a very, very good way. The judge lays bare the idea that this is the United States of America, and in the United States of America, one person or one committee of people in Albany do not have the right to essentially wake up every day and decide what's best for us. Only the legislature can do that after public debate. So going back to the executive order issue, the governor, well, let me back up. The legislature, as I said, changed that executive order law and effectively gave the governor the ability to not only suspend current laws or modify current laws, but also to enact new laws, right? It's almost an oxymoron to call it a new law because a law is not a law unless it's something that's debated and passed by the legislature and signed into law by the governor. But nonetheless, the legislature turned the keys over. So all of these executive orders that came out at the beginning were only legal because the legislature changed the law right before the pandemic. And I'm not going to, put that tinfoil hat on right now, but I think you understand, what was probably going on there. So, but what changed back in, I think it was March of 2021. It was in the spring leading up to, April, May, June of 2021 when things started to turn, right? Right before Cuomo got his ass kicked out of office. the legislature reconvened and took back that power, right? They came in and they amended, or they changed the law. They reverted the law back to what it was before. They reverted the executive law back to what it was before, back to what it should be. And that is, the governor does not have the authority to issue new laws, only to suspend or modify existing laws. And so now Kathy Hochul, right? So in steps Kathy Hochul. So now Kathy Hochul steps into office, right? So the keys get turned over to her. So she jumps in the Cadillac, right? And she's getting ready to fire that Cadillac up. And all of a sudden she realizes, oh my gosh, this is only a 6-cylinder. This isn't the 14-cylinder that Cuomo was driving around, right? Kathy Hochul's pissed. She's pissed because she doesn't have the emergency powers that Governor Cuomo had, right? For two reasons. One, there was no longer a state of emergency. And I'm going to jump around here a little bit, but that's one of the things that the judge decided and ruled upon in this court ruling, this court decision that just came out of Nassau County. He specifically wrote into his decision that the state directly acknowledged in court during oral arguments that there was no state of emergency, that there was no longer a state of emergency at the time that this code and regulation for indoor mask mandates for the kids was put into place back on August 27th. And what the judge analyzed is that if Kathy Hochul had the authority that Cuomo had, then she could have just issued an executive order the same way Cuomo did, right? Cuomo issued an executive order saying that masks are required in school, and it was challenged and it was upheld because, unfortunately, the state legislature, as I just explained, gave him that authority. But Kathy Hochul no longer had that authority on August 27th. And so what this judge lays out in his ruling is, because Kathy Hochul knew she didn't have the authority, she therefore didn't issue an executive order because she knew she didn't have the authority to do so. And what she did effectively was do an end around. She went to her Department of Health and said, you know what, you guys do it. You guys do it. I don't have the authority to do it, so you do it. Well, guess what? They didn't have the authority either. She knew damn well they didn't have the authority, but she doesn't care because by the time it gets overturned, it's not on her, right? She can say, I didn't issue any executive orders. This is on the Department of Health. The Department of Health doesn't really care either because, they're not a political body. They don't have to worry about reelection. They get their huge salaries, their huge pensions. They're not going anywhere. But thank God for the plaintiff's lawyers here, right? Thank God for these lawyers. I wish I knew their names offhand. Coincidentally, one of the lawyers is his first name is Chad. But thank God for these two lawyers that brought this lawsuit, and to the judge who made the ruling. They saw right through it. They articulated the very things that you and I have been talking about for the past 18 months to 2 years now, and they convinced the judge that it was logical and lawful, their position, and the judge agreed and wrote a very detailed, analytical decision on this issue. So there, there's where things stand. Now, let me just give me a minute here. I'm going to look at my notes here, make sure I cover everything I want to cover. So, now we're to what's the practical effect of this court order, and you all know what the answer to that question is, unfortunately, right now, because you all lived it today. And I heard from dozens and dozens of you, whether it be through phone calls, text messages, Facebook Messenger. I've tried to respond to as many people as I can. I apologize to those of you out there that I did not specifically respond to. I'm just one person. I'm doing my best. I can't get back to everybody personally. But here's the thing. Everybody has been asking since day one. And when I say day one, I mean going back to the beginning of all this. Everyone has been asking, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? What's the law? What's the law? Can I do this? Can I do that? And my answer has been consistent all along. All of this stuff is illegal, and you need to take charge of your own affairs, right? If you know what's right, do what's right. If you know what's wrong, don't do that. And we've known intuitively all along that this mask mandate was illegal. So everybody had clamored for months and months and months and months and months for a lawsuit, and some of the lawsuits have failed, and now this one has been successful. Now, please don't take this the wrong way, parents. This is important. I want you to hear me out here. But now you have the court ruling that's in your favor, and you're still asking, what do we do? And I get it. I get that as a practical matter, you tried to send your kids to school today without a mask on and you were met with opposition. But that's all you can do. You're following the law now. The school district is not. The school districts are absolutely categorically jumping the shark on this. They're breaking the law. They're refusing to follow the law, and they're doing it openly. You've seen the emails. I received the emails today. I compared the emails. I had an email correspondence or an email exchange with my superintendent in East Irondequoit, and they are flat out openly acknowledging that they are not going to follow the law. So here we are, right? Here we are, and all we can do is follow the law. So if your child feels comfortable enough to go to school and not wear a mask, which is going to entail being bullied, harassed, marginalized, separated, discriminated against, stuck in a room. Did I say bullied? I saw somewhere today, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, I don't know. There's been so much stuff flying around, but somebody mentioned about how for years, and I always used to talk about this, for years, the schools have been the campaign of information about bullying, right? No bullying. These are no bullying zones. You've seen the posters all over your school. Everything's a no bully zone. And what do I always tell you? Whatever the hell these people are saying, they are doing the opposite, right? So when they tell you that bullying is not allowed, they're the bullies, right? And here we are. And now the proof is in the pudding because they've done nothing but bully your children. So you have to fight back. It's as simple as that. You have to fight back. I'm not sure what that means for each of you individually. You'll have to decide, but you need to fight back. They are bullying your children. They are harassing your children. It's gross. It's immoral. It's disgusting. Keep flooding the zone. Keep sending the emails. Keep sending your kids to school without the masks. And what I started to say a minute ago is this. I get that. I'm in the same boat as many of you. We have young children now who for 2 years, have been told that they are going to get sick or they are going to cause others to get sick if they come to school and don't wear a mask. And these are young, impressionable minds, and our school districts have done their best to brainwash them and harass them and bully them. And today was no different. So now our children are afraid, right? So I had a conversation with my daughter today, with one of my 3 daughters, and it went something like this. Sweetie, you know that you don't have to wear a mask anymore if you don't want. And she said, yeah, but if I'm the only one that doesn't wear a mask, then, I'm going to be uncomfortable and the adults are going to come up to me and tell me that I have to wear one and I have to listen to the adults. Now, that's very troubling, right? That's very troubling to hear from your 14-year-old daughter, because we also know that there are adults in these school districts, like the principal in Hilton, who spent 20 years sexually molesting and abusing upwards of 20 to 30 young boys. So what scares the shit out of me is that my daughter believes that an adult at school, whatever they tell her to do, she must do. And I've always raised my children. I have always wanted my children to respect adults and listen to adults. But how do you teach your child? And look, I'm just, speaking from the heart here and speaking out loud at this point, and you all have to decide as parents how to handle this. I'm speaking to you right now, not as an attorney, but as a fellow parent. But it pains me that my 14-year-old daughter right now is stuck in a position where she has to try to differentiate between, when an adult tells her to do something that's lawful and moral versus when an adult tells her to do something that's clearly unlawful and immoral. And of course, they never should be put in that position, because the adults, the superintendents and the principals and the teachers are supposed to understand and recognize and follow the law. And today we found out, in their own words, that they don't plan to. So now they've put us in a tough spot, because they don't care, right? They have lawyers that they hire with our money, right? And these lawyers are clearly advising them to hold the line and to continue to enforce this mask mandate, even though it's now been declared illegal. So they don't care, right? And they don't want egg on their face. They've been running with this phony narrative for 2 years now, so they want to keep it going, right? They're getting paid. They're getting CARES money. They're getting all this money from the federal government, grant money, this money, that money, and it's all tied to these mask mandates and eventually vaccine mandates. And they don't want to back off. They don't want to admit that they were wrong. So we're
Chad,
yeah.
if I can interrupt,
Yeah.
the judge has just granted the stay.
Really. Can you zoom in a little bit for me?
Maybe. Hold on. This is from the New York Times.
No, that's troubling.
Ah.
An appeals court granted a motion to temporarily block a lower court ruling that had struck down the state's mask mandate. Well, so there you have it, folks. The stay was granted. So what that means from a legal standpoint, thanks, Austin, for that update. That's important. What that means from a legal standpoint is, now we're back to square one. It doesn't mean that that the fight's over. The case goes on, but while the case goes on and works its way through the legal system of the appeals that are going to ensue, the ruling that was issued by the Nassau County Court is being stayed. And by stayed, what that means is effectively it's put on hold, right? So the judge's ruling is put on hold. Everything stops in its tracks. Everything reverts back to what the so-called law was before, as far as the masks. So we're right back to square one. So we're going to pivot here. We're going to pivot. I planned on discussing this anyway, but I guess now is a good time to pivot back. So, and that is, as I mentioned a few moments ago, we've always known as parents that intuitively this mask mandate is illegal. And luckily, the Nassau County Court judge, Supreme Court judge in Nassau County, agreed and analyzed it, very well. And it was very, very well written from a legal standpoint, and in my opinion, 100% correct. But we know that the law, as it stands, and based on the stay, and for anyone that's just tuning in, let me just clarify. Apparently, a stay has been issued by an appellate judge in New York State. A stay has been issued on the ruling out of Nassau County. So the judge's ruling in Nassau County that declared the mask mandate illegal has now been put on hold, temporarily put on hold until the case can be further litigated. So, yeah, you're right, Christina. This is absolutely disgusting. But in my opinion, nothing changes from a practical standpoint. In my opinion, the mask mandate, the one I'm referencing from August 27th, it's still illegal. It's still unconstitutional. It's still unenforceable. And quite frankly, you should still send your children to school tomorrow without a mask on, because what the school districts demonstrated today, what was exposed today, even though it was short-lived, right? Even though it was short-lived, to me, it was very telling, because what the school districts demonstrated today was they have zero intentions of giving up their authority that they think they have. They have zero intentions on following the law. Look, here's the bottom line. If they weren't going to follow the law today, what makes you think that after this case winds through the court system, and if it's ultimately successful, meaning, from our standpoint, if the court ultimately rules that the mask mandate is illegal, why would we think that the school districts are going to follow it? Right? Because the reasons that they gave today for not following it will not have changed by the time this case makes its way through the court system, because you heard what the excuses were today. One of the excuses you heard today was that the two court decisions I mentioned earlier, the one out of Albany County in November and this one out of Nassau County, were inconsistent. And to some extent, that's correct. The Albany County court did decide that the mask mandate was not illegal. And then this court in Nassau County ruled that it was illegal. And that's still going to be the case if ultimately this court decides and it's upheld that it's illegal. There'll still be that inconsistent ruling. So that's never going to change. So that excuse, which that's all it is nothing but an excuse, will still exist. And so nothing is going to change if we ultimately win this lawsuit, right? If the lawyers and the parties that brought this lawsuit are ultimately successful, what confidence do you have that your superintendent is going to follow that final determination? Because then the other excuse that they've been given is, and again, presumably by their lawyers, and now they're regurgitating it to us, is that the New York State Department of Education is telling them to continue to follow the mask mandate. And their legal reasoning, presumably behind that, is because the New York State Department of Education was not named in this lawsuit. The local school districts, any one of them, how many thousands are, I don't know if there's thousands of them, but how many hundreds of local school boards are there in New York State? None of them were named either. So their idea or their argument is that we weren't a party to this lawsuit. We as school boards were not a party to this lawsuit. We as the New York State Department of Education was not a party to this lawsuit, and therefore we're not bound by this court ruling. And again, that's not going to change either, unless these attorneys decide to add the New York State Department of Education to the lawsuit or any one particular school district. I don't think they will, and I don't think they need to, because, as I mentioned earlier, the reason why the judge's decision was what it was is because the New York State Department of Health is an administrative body that does not have the authority to pass law and to enforce law, right? And if the New York State Department of Health does not have the authority to institute and enforce law, then certainly the New York State Department of Education doesn't, and certainly a local school board does not, okay? Because all of these state administrative agencies are considered on the same plane, right? The legislature is up here, right? Where's the camera? The legislature is up here, and the administrative agencies are down here. And all of the administrative agencies, right, all 80 to 100 of them are on the same level playing field. So if a court decides that one particular administrative agency does not have the authority to institute and enforce law, well, then it just goes without saying, quite frankly, that no other administrative agency can do that. And even more so in this case, because what we're talking about here is a mask mandate that is designed to alleviate a public health concern, right? So effectively, from an expertise level, we're talking about public health. We're talking about viruses. We're talking about immunology. We're talking about science and medicine, right? What department in New York State would have the authority to delve into those topics and issues? The Department of Health, of course, right? And the Department of Health is the party that was named in this lawsuit. And the court said the Department of Health does not have the authority to do what they did. So now, how can the Department of Education, who does not have any expertise or any authority to deal in health and the safety, right? In the public health and the public safety of the citizens of the state of New York, including your children, the New York State Department of Education, and certainly not a local school board, would ever have the authority to jump into that deep end, right? Every state agency has their own deep end of expertise that they're allowed to delve into, right? And the Department of Health obviously is the only state agency that would have the expertise and the authority to jump into this particular deep end of mask mandates and social distancing regulations and all of that. Everyone else, including the Department of Education and the local school boards, the most that they can do is simply go along with whatever the Department of Health regulates, right? But again, the law, or the court, I should say, the court pulled that rug out from underneath the Department of Health. The court said that the very foundation of what they were attempting to do here with the mask mandates was considered illegal because they did it outside the scope of the legislative body of New York State. So I'm probably beating a dead horse, but if the judge decided that even the Department of Health, who could presumably have the authority to do this, doesn't have the authority, then obviously no other entity in New York State could even begin to discuss the topic. So these school districts and these superintendents who sent emails to you all day long telling you that, oh yeah, but our board policy says such and such, and the Department of Education sent us an email and it says such and such. That's bullshit, right? That is all complete and utter bullshit. All right. And you just have to tell them that. You have to tell them. The board, right? Think about it. And I don't want to demean the board members individually because, I don't have a specific person that I'm referring to, but as a general matter, just think about it. How could your local board of education even pretend to think that they have the authority to get into health and science and public health and immunology and decide that they get to be the experts on public health? Obviously, they don't have that authority. These board policies, the districts that do have board policies in place, and I'll just use my district as an example, as I always do, the East Irondequoit Central School District, board policy number 2090 declares that masks are mandatory in schools. They can't do that. It's illegal. It's utterly illegal. Now, it's de facto legal. It has the effect of being lawful as long as the Department of Health continues to run with it. Because if the Department of Health doesn't get overturned on it, then nobody's going to bother challenging the school board, right? Because the end game would be the same. Even if you were successful in overturning the school board on their policy, because they don't have the authority to issue these policies, you would still be left with the Department of Health looming over your head. So you wouldn't even bother challenging it. But again, this court ruling pulled that rug out from underneath the Department of Health. And if they pulled the rug out from underneath the Department of Health, then they've effectively pulled the rug out from underneath the school district too. That's just logic, right? It's deductive reasoning. So in these school districts, they know damn well that their policies are not enforceable. But I've told you this from day one. Our compliance is de facto law for them. As long as we comply, then we effectively render their illegal board policies legal. We give them the authority that they don't have by our inaction, so to speak. By sending our kids to school with masks on, we effectively give them the authority that they don't really truly have. And whether they believe that they have the authority or not becomes irrelevant. But for whatever it's worth, I believe in my heart of hearts that they know damn well they don't have the authority. Leads me to another topic. Let me just check how we're doing on time. We're going to wrap this up soon. But I'm sorry. I just kind of lost my train of thought there. But, this is what I wanted to say. So you all know, it's obvious that these superintendents, they took their marching orders from lawyers last night. Okay. Because this all came out pretty quick, right? By the time we all went to bed last night, all of our superintendents here in Monroe County had already issued an email essentially declaring that they weren't going to follow the law. And when you line those emails up next to each other, which I did many of them today, thank you all for sending those, it was obvious that they were all taking the same marching orders because most of the emails were written almost identical, right? And so there's two firms that I believe are representing collectively all of the school districts. One of the law firms is out of Syracuse. The other one's here locally. And these two law firms are collectively representing the 19 school districts here in Monroe County. And it's my opinion that when these lawyers spoke to their superintendents last night, they obviously advised them not to follow the law. And that's illegal. That is illegal. That is unethical, literally unethical, right? As lawyers, we have a code of ethics that we're bound to follow. And if we don't follow our code of ethics, we can be brought up on ethics violations. Our law licenses can be suspended. They can be revoked forever, right? As attorneys, we are not allowed to advise our clients to break a law or to not follow a court order or a law. And as of this morning, right, as of the time you sent your kids to school, the law of the land was that the school districts could not enforce the mask mandate. But apparently, again, this is just my opinion. It seems pretty obvious, so doesn't it? It's my opinion that these two law firms advised their clients, meaning the boards of education or the superintendents, they advised them, you don't have to follow this law. So they broke the law themselves. The lawyers violated their code of ethics, their New York State code of ethics. So that's just a side issue, quite frankly. And now it's, at least in the time being, it's somewhat irrelevant because now this stay has been issued. So that's where we're at. Austin, I don't know if you've had a chance to monitor the comments, if there's anything that you've seen that.
Man, this is a popular episode today. It's very hard to keep up with all these comments.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I hate to be a Debbie Downer and once again, for those of you that might just be tuning in to find out that the stay, apparently the stay has been granted, meaning that the court ruling out of Nassau County has been put on hold. But I urge you to continue, stay strong, and do what you did today. If you felt comfortable enough to advise your children to go to school today without a mask on, then you should do so again tomorrow in a simple act of civil disobedience. Because as we learned today, and look, I'm not blowing smoke up your butts right now. And I'm usually, the glass is like, 9/10 empty guy. I'm not half full, half empty. I'm like 9/10 empty. I'm just cynical by nature. And I normally wouldn't see any sort of silver linings or positives to this stay being issued. But I see tremendous hope and progress today. And that is born out of the simple fact that, as I've alluded to many times here on the show, that the school districts, they laid bare all of their cards today, right? They exposed themselves today. Your superintendent sent you an email, and now you have an official record. You have your superintendent and your board of education on record declaring that they have no intention of following the law. That's good news. That's good news. We don't have any control over what the ultimate outcome of this lawsuit is. But what we have learned today is our local school districts, many of us already knew this, but we learned today that our local school districts don't care about the law. They don't care about our rights as parents. And they're contemptuous. They're contemptuous. They don't like to be told what to do. They think that they have de facto authority over our children. And, unfortunately, quite frankly, like I've said tonight, and like I've said many times to you all, we've given it to them. And today we started to take some of it back. I know all you parents out there were very aggressive today in standing up for your children, and that's awesome. And we just need to continue to do that, continue to flood the zone, continue to send them emails. These superintendents are feeling emboldened right now. They're going to send out more emails tonight. They're going to cite that the stay is in place, and then just simply ask them this. Well, what does it matter if there's a stay in place? You didn't follow the law today, so why should we follow the law tomorrow? I'll leave it at that. Thanks for joining me. Go America.